The wind always sounded different in remote valleys, especially in the far corners of the old American frontier, where no church bells rang and no town sheriff watched the trails. The tall pines swayed like long shadows of giants, and the cold mountain air smelled of wood smoke, horse sweat, and hidden secrets buried under years of silence. On those forgotten trails walked a young woman who had learned the hard way that some people survived not because they were strong, but because they refused to surrender even after every door had been closed on them. She carried no fine dress, no fancy shoes, and no family name that anyone remembered. Her life began again the moment she realized there was no one left to go back to. Only the long path ahead. She once lived with a couple who called themselves her parents, but the only things they ever gave her were harsh words and chores that tasted like punishment. Nothing she did ever pleased them, and every mistake, big or small, felt like a new sentence handed to her. When drought hit their poor land and hunger became sharper than knives, they accused her of being a burden and left her near the edge of a forest, claiming she could find her own fate since she had grown into adulthood. Their wagon wheels rolled away and never turned back. She stood there with nothing except an old cloth bag, a tin cup, and a heart full of confusion. She did not cry because tears only helped when someone was there to wipe them. The road ahead belonged to riders, hunters, traders, and spirits of old land. She walked alone, listening to nothing but her own footsteps and the occasional distant howl that reminded her she was a small life in a wide world. Her hope was to reach a small town she had once heard about, a place near the trading posts where people from different trails met and offered work in exchange for shelter. She did not dream of riches or luxury, only safety and a chance to be treated like a human soul. After many days and nights, her strength faded. A cold evening rain pushed her toward a hidden valley where she saw a faint orange glow in the distance. It looked like a campfire, steady and alive. The only sign of warmth she had seen since leaving the cruel hands of those who raised her. She hesitated because every traveler learned that firelight could belong to friendly hands or dangerous ones. But the biting wind left her no choice. She approached slowly, keeping her voice silent and her steps soft. Under a rock shelter, she saw a man lying near the campfire. His chest rose and fell very slowly, and his body looked weak like it had fought many winters. He was clearly Apache, wearing a hide blanket and traditional beads with eagle feathers tied near his braided hair. His skin carried scars, not from cowardice, but from a life that only warriors understood. Even in weakness, his presence felt powerful, like a mountain spirit resting after battle. She froze, unsure whether he was alive, dangerous, or even conscious at first. She thought of turning away, finding another direction, maybe walking until her strength gave out. But something inside her refused to abandon this stranger. She knew what it felt like to be left behind. She stepped closer, slowly, and whispered that she meant no harm. The man opened his eyes a little, and his voice sounded rough, like gravel. He tried to rise, but pain forced him back. She gave him water from her tin cup, and although his hands trembled, he managed to drink a few drops. He watched her with sharp eyes, not fearful, not angry, but trying to understand who she was without asking. She gathered dry twigs to keep the fire alive, and looked for anything nearby that could help him. His camp had a small leather pouch with herbs, so she placed them near his hands, letting him decide how to use them. He nodded, showing he trusted her presence for that moment. The rain turned lighter, and the fire warmed their bones. She sat a few feet away, unsure if she should speak. After a long silence, he told her in a slow, tired voice that he was not afraid of death, only unfinished duties. The night passed quietly, and she woke up early to look for berries or water. Though hungry, she brought everything first to him. She wanted no reward or favor, only humanity in a land where kindness was as rare as gold dust. When she returned, he spoke again, saying that she had a strong spirit and that people with nothing often saw the truth. Act better than those who claimed to have everything during the next day. He told her that he had once been a respected warrior and hunter, a man whose footsteps followed the same trails as the great ones before him. But an ambush near the river left him wounded, and he had no time to ride back to his people. He said the mountains were filled with secrets older than any town's history, and anyone who wandered there needed both courage and honesty. His voice carried pride, pain, and wisdom, and she listened like someone hearing real guidance for the first time as she continued helping him. He asked why she traveled alone, and she answered in short words. He did not pity her or look surprised. Instead, he said that abandoned people often met destiny faster than those protected inside walls. Before resting again, he spoke about a hidden place that few ever saw, a place tied to his bloodline, his honor, and a secret that strangers could not understand. He warned that gold, power, or treasure meant nothing if a heart had no direction. She did not know why he mentioned gold or treasures, but his tone made it sound like more than just wealth. The fire burned low while thick night clouds gathered above, making the forest feel darker than before. He asked her to stay close and listen because time was shorter than both of them wished. She felt her pulse rise, not from fear, but because her life seemed to be stepping into something mysterious and larger than the world she once knew. She believed that meeting him was not an accident, and something hidden waited to reveal itself. Something that would change the meaning of her journey forever, before sleep reached his eyes again. He whispered that there was a heavy truth buried not far from where they camped, protected by the land itself. He said she might be the only soul who could find it, because she carried honesty that could not be taught by any school, church, or wealthy family. She leaned forward, trying to understand his words, but he closed his eyes again, leaving her alone with the firelight, the deep silence, and a question that pulled at her heart like a powerful current. Was he speaking about real treasure made of gold, or a different kind of treasure that could change fate itself? The night was long, and she barely slept even though her body begged for rest. The fire crackled softly, and every sound in the forest seemed louder than usual. She kept glancing at the Apache man, wondering if he would still be breathing when dawn arrived. There was something about the way he spoke, a blend of pain and strength, that made her feel she was standing at the edge of something much bigger than both of them. She hugged her knees close, trying to stay warm, and her mind wandered back to the life she had known before. Now, it felt like a distant dream that did not belong to her anymore. When morning finally came, soft mist covered the valley. Birds called out through the fog, and she checked on him right away. His breathing was shallow but steady, and although his eyes remained closed, his hand tightened slightly when she moved the blanket near his shoulder. She felt a strange sense of responsibility, even though she had known him only for a short time. It was not pity or obligation, but something deeper. Like her heart understood that crossing paths with him was not a simple accident. She prepared a small drink with warm water and herbs, remembering how he used them the night before. She held the cup against his lips until he swallowed at least a little. His eyelids opened slowly. He stared at the sky before turning his eyes toward her. He thanked her with a quiet voice, barely above a whisper. She said he did not have to thank her, but he insisted that every act of kindness changed fate in unseen ways. She noticed that his gaze always searched her face with attention, as if he wanted to confirm that she was not pretending to be something she was not. She told him she simply did what she wished someone had once done for her. His slow nod told her he understood more than she expected. As the day grew brighter, he asked her to help adjust his blanket so he could sit up a little. She placed a fallen log behind him, and he leaned against it with effort. His face showed pain, but he refused to lie helpless. He pointed toward the mountains in the distance and said that somewhere beyond them were the people he belonged to. He spoke with pride, but not arrogance. She could see that being Apache was not something he considered a title, but a way of living, a promise to ancestors and the land. She asked him how he ended up alone and wounded. He took a slow breath before answering, as if revisiting a memory that still burned like fire. He said he had been part of a small group that traveled to gather rare herbs for healing rituals. On their way back, they crossed paths with a group of men who wanted something from them. He did not say exactly what, but she understood it was something valuable, maybe sacred. A fight broke out, and he was separated from his companions, wounded, and forced to hide in the mountains. He managed to create a small camp near the rocks where nobody would find him easily, but he knew his strength was leaving him faster than he expected. She listened quietly, feeling anger toward unknown men who caused his suffering. Life on the frontier was filled with stories of greed, betrayal, and desperate souls chasing riches or land. But hearing it from a man who had lived with honor made it feel heavier. She wondered whether the treasure he hinted at was connected to the attack. If someone was willing to fight or kill for it, then it was not a simple rumor. She thought about gold, a word that changed people faster than hunger. Gold made some people brave and others cruel. It built towns but also destroyed friendships and families. The man looked at her and said that not all treasures were made to be spent or traded. Some treasures were born from promises and protected through generations. She wanted to ask more, but his eyes closed again, and she decided not to push. She did not want to be like the people who only cared about their own gain. She gathered more wood and repaired the small shelter using dry branches and leaves so rain would not soak him again. While she worked, she talked softly about her own life, not to complain, not to share so he would not feel alone. She told him she had never known a real home filled with warmth or protection. The cabin where she grew up always felt like a place she did not belong, as if she had been planted in the wrong soil. She never understood why she was blamed for things she did not cause. And she never understood how adults could sleep peacefully after sending someone away to survive alone. She explained how she had hoped to reach a town where people traded furs, tools, seeds, and small amounts of silver. She dreamed of working in exchange for food and maybe a small room with a wooden bed that did not creak at night. She never dreamed of riches or jewelry. She only dreamed of being welcomed. When she finished speaking, he opened his eyes again and looked at her as if he had been listening the whole time. He told her that a person without a place was like a bird whose nest had been taken by the wind. But even a lost bird could build a new one if it refused to stop flying. His words calmed something inside her, and she felt a strange comfort she never found in church sermons or town gossip. Later, she walked near the river to clean the tin cup, and while there, she noticed marks on the rocks, symbols carved with purpose. They were not random scratches, but patterns like warnings or directions. She followed the marks a little farther until she reached an area where the water formed a small pool. She saw something shiny under the surface, but she could not tell what it was from afar. Her heart beat faster, wondering if it was natural or something hidden. She reached down but decided to stop, remembering the injured man's words. She did not want to touch anything without knowing its meaning. When she returned, she mentioned the carved markings, and his expression changed. He asked her to describe them carefully. When she finished, he explained that those were sacred signs placed by his people long ago. They warned outsiders not to disturb what lay beyond. His tone was serious, and even in weakness, his voice carried authority. She felt a chill inside her chest, not from fear, but from realizing she had stepped into a place not meant for careless hands. As evening approached, he asked her to sit close so he could speak without wasting breath. His voice lowered, and he told her that the treasure he spoke of was not just something he found, something passed down through generations with heavy responsibility. He said many white men and outlaws believed gold was the only meaning of life, but his people knew that some gold carried stories, not greed. He said that if the wrong hands reached it, the mountain would lose a part of its soul. She did not know how to respond, but she promised that if she ever learned more, she would protect it, not trade it. He studied her expression, searching for lies, but there were none. She realized that trust between strangers could sometimes grow faster than trust between family members. It depended on honesty, not blood. Night returned, but this time she stayed closer to him, not out of duty, but out of quiet loyalty. The forest grew colder, and she added more firewood, while whispering that he was not alone. She hoped he heard her. She could not shake the feeling that everything around her was preparing for something. The symbols, the hidden truth, his fading strength, and her unexpected role all connected like pieces of a puzzle she did not yet understand. Before sleep claimed him again, he said there were still things he had to reveal before the final moment, and that she must be ready to hear them without fear. The flames danced across his tired face, and she felt her breath tighten as she wondered what truth awaited her when the next. Sunrise came. The next morning came colder than the last. A thin layer of frost covered the grass, and the sky looked pale as if the sun was struggling to rise. She rubbed her hands together and moved toward the fire pit to warm them. The Apache man was awake, though barely. His eyes were open but tired, like he had spent the whole night fighting a battle inside his own body. When she knelt beside him, he tried to straighten himself, and she helped him without saying a word. She sensed he had something heavy on his mind, something that could not wait much longer. He told her that the men who attacked him were still out there. They had followed him across the ridges because they believed he knew the location of a hidden treasure, one that old stories claimed was buried deep within the mountains. She felt her heart tighten. She had only known him for a short time, yet she already feared what would happen if those men discovered their camp. He said the men were hungry for gold and had no respect for sacred land or the people who protected it. He did not know how close they were now, but he warned that the mountains carried every sound, and danger often traveled silently. She tried to steady her breath, reminding herself that fear could not help either of them. As she gathered water from a nearby stream, she noticed fresh footprints in the mud, deeper than her own, shaped by heavy boots. The tracks led toward the ridge and faded into the trees. Someone else had passed through recently. She rushed back to the camp and told him what she had seen. His expression darkened, and he said they needed to stay hidden and keep the fire small, so smoke would not rise too high. She covered the flames with rocks and dried dirt until only a small glow remained, while they sat quietly. He began to speak again, his voice slow but firm. He said that the treasure the men sought was not a pile of loose coins or shiny nuggets scattered in the dirt. It was something hidden with purpose by his ancestors, something meant to protect the future, not to be traded for whiskey or bullets. He said that only a few people from his tribe even knew it existed, and those who did were raised to understand its weight. He told her that if the treasure fell into the wrong hands, strangers would fight, steal, or even kill for it, and entire hillsides might be torn apart by greed. She listened to every word, trying to imagine what kind of treasure could be so important. She asked him why those men believed he knew the exact location. He said one of them had once traveled with traders who dealt with stolen artifacts, men who believed that every old object hidden by native people must be tied to gold. That man had overheard conversations from elders during peaceful trade seasons. He twisted their words, turning sacred stories into tales of secret riches. Greed made him dangerous, and that danger had grown into a small band of outlaws willing to stalk the mountains for days. As they talked, the wind shifted, carrying a strange scent. It was faint but sharp, like horses and old gunpowder. She felt her stomach twist. He breathed deeply and nodded, confirming her fear without saying a single word. She scanned the edges of the forest, seeing nothing but branches and fog. Yet she could not shake the feeling they were no longer alone in the valley. To distract her from panic, he asked her to bring the leather pouch he had kept since their first night. She placed it in his hands, and he loosened the ties with great effort. Inside were small items, each wrapped carefully in hide, carved stones. A feather stained with sacred paint, a small bundle of herbs, and a narrow piece of folded cloth. He told her these were symbols from his people, carried only by those entrusted with sacred responsibilities. She felt honored he was showing them to her, even though she did not fully understand their meaning. He explained that long before her parents were born, long before any settlers built cabins in the valley, his ancestors hid something powerful beneath the mountains. It was not meant to bring riches to anyone, but to protect the land from outsiders who arrived with destruction in their hearts. He said every generation had guardians who learned the story and watched the trails. When those guardians passed their knowledge to the next, the treasure remained safe. But now, with him wounded and separated from his people, he feared the chain of protection might break. She looked at the mountains in the distance. They seemed taller now, like giants, leaning over the land, watching every soul who walked the trails. She wondered if she could carry such responsibility, even for a short time. She wondered if fate had pulled her here for a reason she could not yet understand. She told him she did not know much about sacred traditions, but she did know how to keep a promise. He studied her face for a long moment before speaking again. He said he believed she was strong enough to hold truth without letting greed enter her thoughts. He told her her heart was clear. That was more important than any skill. While they spoke, she heard a snap of branches from the trees behind them. She froze and grabbed a long stick from the ground, ready to defend him if she had to. But a moment later, a thin figure stepped into the clearing. It was an older woman dressed in worn clothes, her hair tied back with a faded scarf. She held a basket of herbs and looked equally surprised to see them. The Apache man narrowed his eyes, trying to identify her. But the woman raised her hands and said she meant no harm. She lived farther down the valley, and had been gathering plants near the ridge. She noticed smoke earlier, and came to check if someone needed help. The woman glanced at the injured man, then at the young woman, and asked how long they had been here. She answered cautiously, not wanting to reveal too much. The older woman looked troubled, but not threatening. After a moment, she told them that a group of strangers had passed near her cabin 2 days ago. They carried rifles and spoke of searching for someone who had escaped them. She said they left footprints toward the north ridge, but she could not tell whether they still wandered close by. Her words confirmed their fears. The outlaws had not abandoned the chase, and now the valley felt even smaller. The older woman offered to bring warm broth and some healing herbs, but warned that she could not stay long. Strangers made her uneasy, and she did not want trouble drawn to her door. After she left, the Apache man muttered that even innocent people could be harmed if those men grew desperate. The thought weighed heavily on both of them. As the sun slid behind the hills, shadows stretched across the ground. She kept the fire low, but her ears remained sharp, listening for any movement. The Apache man's breathing grew rough again, and he told her there was one more part of the story she needed to understand. He said the treasure was not buried in a single spot, but guarded within layers of stone and marked paths. Only someone with the right understanding could reach it without triggering danger. Those who did not follow the right path would only find empty caves or risk their lives in unstable ground. Her curiosity grew. But he stopped speaking when coughs shook his chest. She gave him water and waited until he caught his breath. He said the men who hunted him would not care about warnings or sacred markings. They would break rocks and dig tunnels until they destroyed everything, including the land itself. He said the mountains had already given signs of unrest. She remembered the strange rumble she heard the previous night, a sound that felt like the earth shifting in its sleep. Now she wondered if that was connected to what he was saying. The hours dragged on. She stayed alert, watching the tree line. Every sound became sharper. Every rustling leaf felt suspicious. She imagined the outlaws creeping closer, looking for tracks or smoke trails. She imagined them discovering their camp and cornering them with no escape. The tension built inside her until her pulse felt louder than the fire's crackle. Yet beneath all that fear, something else stirred. A sense of resolve she had never felt before. She did not know exactly what she would do when danger arrived, but she knew she would not run. Not this time. Not after everything she had survived. Not after finding someone who trusted her without demanding anything in return. The Apache man opened his eyes again and whispered that the moment to reveal the full truth was coming. He said she must be ready to make a choice when the time arrived, a choice that would change her path forever. She leaned closer, waiting for him to speak the next words. But before he could, a distant sound echoed through the valley. Faint, but unmistakable. The sound of a rifle being cocked somewhere in the trees. The instant she heard that sound, her breath stopped like someone had pressed a hand against her chest. She looked toward the trees, her body stiff, and her heartbeat shaking through her ribs. The Apache man did not move, but his eyes grew sharp and cold like flint. He whispered that they must stay silent and listen carefully before reacting. She crouched low near the fire pit, slowly covering it with more dirt to hide any last trace of light. The shadows grew thicker, and the wind barely moved, as if the land itself waited. Another sound followed, like footsteps on broken branches, slow and testing. Whoever was out there was not lost. They were searching. She whispered to the Apache man and asked if they should try to move. But he said he could not walk far, and she should not risk running in panic. His voice carried no fear, only steady strength, like a warrior ready to face whatever came. She wished she had the same courage, but she stayed close, refusing to abandon him. Moments passed with no further sounds, and she wondered if it was only her imagination. But deep inside, she knew it was real. She tried to remember everything he had taught her about the mountain, the hidden treasure, and the way greed could twist men into shadows with rifles. She picked up a long stick and sharpened the end with a small stone. It was not much, but having something in her hands made her feel less helpless. The Apache man watched her with quiet approval and told her that strength did not always come from weapons, but from the heart of the one holding them. The air felt heavy, and she sensed someone was still near, maybe watching them from behind the thick trees. She kept her back against the rock wall so no one could sneak behind her. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Her legs trembled, not because she was weak, but because she was preparing for something unknown. She thought about her past, the cold night when her parents left her behind, and how she walked with no direction. Somewhere along that lonely path, she found herself next to a man who trusted her more than anyone had before. She decided silently that she would not let danger take him from the world without a fight. Suddenly, a voice called out, low and rough, telling them to show themselves. The voice sounded like it belonged to the group hunting the Apache man. She did not respond. The voice called again, louder, threatening to search the entire valley if they did not step forward. She held her breath and leaned close to the Apache man. He whispered that the treasure had a protector besides him, and that the land did not allow greed easily. She wanted to ask more, but he asked her instead to trust him and stay calm. The footsteps approached, slow but certain. Then, just when she expected someone to burst through the clearing, everything went silent again. A different sound broke the tension, a strange rumble inside the earth, soft but deep. The Apache man lifted his head slightly, saying the mountains were restless. She remembered the carved symbols near the river and wondered if the men had disturbed something sacred. Night turned into morning, with very little sleep for either of them. The valley looked peaceful again, but she no longer trusted peace. She checked the area around the camp and found nothing out of place except a broken twig and a faint track near a patch of soil. The outlaws were still somewhere nearby, waiting. She knew they would not give up easily later in the day. The older woman returned holding a small clay pot filled with warm broth. She noticed their tired faces and asked if danger had come close. They explained the sound and the voice. The woman grew pale and warned them that the outlaws were known for being cunning. She offered to let the young woman hide at her cabin for safety, but she refused to leave the Apache man. The older woman nodded and whispered that courage sometimes chose people who did not see it growing inside them. When the woman left, the Apache man called her closer and said there was something important she needed to do in case the outlaws found them. He opened his pouch again and handed her the folded cloth, the one that looked old and sacred. Inside the cloth was a thin carved stone tablet with symbols drawn by skilled hands. He told her that the tablet contained directions only someone with patience and a clear heart could understand. If anything happened to him, she must protect it and take it to a safe place. She closed her fingers around it and promised she would guard it with her life. The Apache man finally revealed that the treasure was not just gold pieces, but part of an ancient collection of items hidden by his ancestors to preserve their wisdom and protect the future of their people. Some pieces were said to carry great value to outsiders, but much greater value to those who understood their true purpose. She realized that she was not just helping a wounded stranger anymore. She was standing between sacred heritage and men who viewed everything as something to sell. As daylight faded again, she decided they needed to move to a different shelter before nightfall. Helping him walk was slow, but she supported him with all her strength. The forest felt darker as they moved deeper through bushes and rocks. Every small sound made her pause. He told her to follow a hidden path near a formation of 3 tall stones that looked like old watchers guarding the land. They reached a narrow cave-like opening covered with vines. Inside, it was dry and warmer than the open air. They laid down fur blankets gathered earlier and rested. Before sleep took over, he told her another part of the story. Many years ago, a young warrior from his tribe had fallen in love with someone outside their people. Someone who showed kindness in a world filled with division. The elders feared that outsiders would misuse sacred knowledge, so they hid the treasure deeper than before, making sure only those with true heart would find it. She wondered if that love story was somehow repeating through her journey. She woke later to distant thunder. But there were no storm clouds. The ground shook faintly again, and she feared that the outlaws were digging or breaking stones somewhere in the mountains. She rushed back to the river area with carved markings to check if anything had changed. To her shock, she found fresh marks near the ground, where someone had tried to break the stone's surface. The water in the small pool had turned cloudy, as if something beneath had been disturbed. Her heart raced as she placed her hand on the rock, and a warm pulse vibrated through it, like the land itself was warning her. Someone shouted from far behind her. She ducked and hid behind a thick tree. It was one of the outlaws, holding a rifle and calling out to the others that he found new signs. She crawled backward through bushes, praying he would not see her. The outlaw kept scanning the trees and hitting rocks with his rifle stock. Then he turned to leave, telling the others to bring more tools. She waited until silence returned, then rushed back to the hidden cave. She told the Apache man everything. His jaw clenched with worry, and he said the time had come for her to learn the route written on the tablet. She was not sure she could understand it, but he said the land would guide her if her heart stayed clear. She studied the strange lines and shapes, noticing how they pointed not like normal directions, but like warnings and reminders, as if nature itself was part of the map. He told her that if the outlaws found the wrong entrance, the mountain could collapse or poison water sources, harming animals and people. She felt tears burning behind her eyes, not out of fear for herself, but for the damage greedy hands could bring upon a peaceful valley. She asked him if his people would come searching. He said they might, but the land was wide, and signals could be lost. He feared they would arrive too late unless someone acted quickly. She realized then that the task might fall on her shoulders, even though she felt unprepared. She looked into his tired but steady eyes, and something inside her changed. For the first time, she believed she was not cursed by abandonment. She was placed on a path for a reason. He placed his hand over hers, telling her that fate sometimes found survivors because they had the strength to see what others ignored. She felt a new fire burning inside her, not anger, but courage. She promised him she would not let the treasure fall into the wrong hands, even if she had to face danger alone. The cave entrance suddenly flickered with light from torches. Being carried near the rocks outside, voices echoed through the valley, louder and closer than ever before. She tightened her grip on the tablet, her breath shaking with both fear and determination. This time, she did not plan to hide. The cave felt smaller the moment the torchlight flickered near the entrance. She held the carved tablet close against her chest, reminding herself that she had already survived the kind of pain that tried to destroy her spirit. The Apache man placed his hand over his heart, whispering that courage did not come from strength of body, but from truth of soul. She nodded, and for the first time, she felt like she was no longer the girl left behind in the cold. She stepped toward the entrance slowly, preparing herself for whatever she might face. The torches outside moved closer, and shadows began to stretch across the cave walls. She could hear the outlaws arguing with each other, eager to find gold and ignore warnings, before she stepped outside. She remembered the river pool where she saw the carved markings. She thought about how the earth trembled each time the outlaws disturbed the mountains. She realized the treasure could not be protected if she only hid in fear. She needed to make them believe there was nothing worth seeking. Or she needed to reach a safe place before they found the true path. She asked the Apache man if there was another hidden exit. He pointed toward a narrow gap covered by stones deeper inside the cave. She helped him stand slowly, supporting his weight with her shoulder and guiding him through the tight passage until they reached the small opening. Outside, there was a steep hill covered with thick brush. The only way down was slow and careful, but it was safer than staying where they were. They slipped out quietly, and she covered the gap with branches so no one could see recent movement. With one arm around him and the other steadying her steps, they climbed through the brush until they reached a flat area where tall trees hid them from view. They paused to catch their breath, and he told her that once they reached a certain ridge, they could follow a hidden trail used long ago by his people. She asked if his tribe would be near, and he said they sometimes camped in the low plains by the river. If they could reach it, they might find help. She felt her legs burning from the weight and uneven paths. She refused to stop. The tablet remained safely tied in her bag, close to her heart. The forest around them grew quiet, except for their controlled breathing and the rustle of leaves. When they finally reached the ridge, the Apache man collapsed for a moment and closed his eyes. She dug through her bag and offered water, which he accepted. He whispered that he was proud of her and that her courage would be remembered, no matter what happened next. She heard voices again, this time farther away. The outlaws had entered the cave, believing they were still there. She held her breath and tried to imagine how much time remained before they discovered the empty hiding place. The Apache man squeezed her arm gently, telling her to move forward without hesitation because the future depended on her steps. His hushed voice sounded weaker than before, and she knew his wounds were taking a heavy toll. She held his hand and promised she would not leave him behind. With slow steps, they reached the end of the ridge and followed a path between berry bushes and fallen trees. After some distance, they heard the rushing sound of flowing water. It was the river he spoke of, wide and cold, with mist rising from its edges. She helped him drink and wash his face with gentle hands. Then she guided him toward the lower ground, where the riverbank widened. Footprints appeared near the edge, and she feared the outlaws might have come this way as well. But the footprints seemed lighter and different in pattern. The Apache man smiled softly, saying they might belong to his people. He told her to light a small, smoky signal, one known among his tribe, using the herbs in his pouch. She gathered dry leaves and thin sticks, placed the herbs over the fire, and fanned the smoke so it rose in a slow spiral. When the wind carried it, the scent changed, drifting across the water. He explained that the smoke carried a familiar sign to anyone from his people. They waited in silence, her hand still holding his. She prayed quietly, not to ask for riches or reward, but for help and safety. Time passed slowly, and she began to fear no one would come. But then, through the trees across the river, several figures appeared. They carried bows and spears, and their clothing matched the Apache man's markings and symbols. She stood still, unsure if she should speak. The men crossed the river on horses and approached cautiously. When they recognized the wounded man, they rushed forward and supported him tenderly. Their eyes softened with sadness and respect as they listened to his weakened voice. He told them the truth about the treasure, the outlaws, and the young woman who saved him. They looked at her with deep gratitude, recognizing that she had carried more than any traveler ever expected. One of them, who seemed older with wise eyes, bowed his head to her and said she had shown honor that few outsiders ever understood. He reassured her that she was safe now, and that her kindness would never be forgotten. The Apache man held her hand once more, and said that meeting her was not a mistake, but a path chosen by fate. He told her that she was no longer abandoned, because those who filled her life with meaning were her real family, even if not by blood. She hugged him gently and whispered that she would always remember him. His breathing slowed, but peace settled across his face. Surrounded by his people, he closed his eyes in calm dignity. Knowing that his trust had found a worthy heart, she stepped back, tears filling her eyes. But they were not born from despair. They came from gratitude, love, and a new understanding of her purpose. The tribe invited her to come with them, offering safety, shelter, and a place where she would no longer be treated as a burden. She accepted, feeling her life shifting toward something she never believed she would have. They led her toward their hidden camp, where she received warm food, blankets, and smiles that felt real. Slowly, she learned their traditions, dances, and stories. She helped gather fruits, weave baskets, and care for children. The elders taught her about the land and the meaning of sacred treasures. They never told her where the treasure was hidden, but she no longer needed to know. Protecting it meant living with respect and harmony, not discovering it. Seasons changed, and with each passing moon, she grew stronger and happier. The valley no longer felt like a trap, but like a home. She planted seeds in soil that once frightened her, watched them grow, and found peace in gentle things like sunrise over the hills and the sound of horses. Running in open fields, her story spread quietly among the people. Spoken not as a tale of gold, but as a lesson that riches could never heal a heart. While kindness could rebuild a life, she never returned to the place where she was abandoned, because she found a better path filled with dignity and belonging. The treasure remained hidden and safe, guarded by honor, not greed. She lived as a symbol of hope, showing that even those cast away by cruel hands could bloom in a land that valued human spirit more than shiny metal. In the end, she did not become rich by gold. She became rich by finding herself. Her heart found a true home, and her name lived softly in stories whispered by fireside, reminding every listener that destiny does not always begin with love and safety. Sometimes destiny begins with pain and loss, only to guide a soul toward the life it was meant to live. And the mountains kept their sacred secret forever.